Hello friends, you are on Pavel Sebastianov's channel. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell so you don't miss new episodes. Thanks for your support. Good afternoon friends. Today we are talking about politics again. The focus of our conversation will be the tax service of Ukraine. I invited Vlad Sidorenko to the studio. Hello, Vlad. Today we decided to dwell in more detail on the issues of offenses in the tax service. Hi all. To start our conversation, I want to give a few quotes about what is happening in the tax service from different institutions. Let's start with the publication on the website of the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine. There, candidate of legal sciences, head of the tax legislation department of the financial legislation department, Maestrenko, writes about what the main problems in the tax service are in Ukraine. The main problem is ineffective export, when documents for the export of goods that are returned are simply processed across the Ukrainian border. That is, the goods can enter, leave and be constantly documented for reimbursement and placement. Sales are processed through several efficient businesses, creating an inefficient tax system. Import of goods into customs territory at reduced prices. Sale of products. These are schemes that have been talked about for 10 years, but they remain unchanged in the tax service. Quote from Verkhovna Rada Deputy Marianne Zablotsky: tax theft, especially VAT, is rampant in Ukraine. Every time we buy a product in a store, we pay 20% in the form of VAT to the state budget, but many goods go through special operations, the so-called tax steep. Because of this, the budget is missing billions. There is also a lot of talk about the scale of this problem. For example, economist Andrei Boyarchuk from the Institute of Socioeconomic Transformations writes that budget losses from the actions of tax authorities range from 240 to 400 billion hryvnia per year. When Ukraine had a GDP of 2 trillion hryvnia in 2014, this was a significant percentage. Vlad, I know you write about the tax service and the people who work there. Why is your information valuable? Yes, this is important information. For example, in the Kharkiv region, the Commission for Blocking and Unblocking Tax Invoices works very effectively. Let's try to put together a general picture of what is happening throughout the country. How can an amount of 400 billion hryvnia disappear unnoticed? Why is it invisible? Very noticeable and understandable. Everything is visible and controlled, but no one wants to look in this direction. It's a difficult question. Why isn't anyone reacting? The question is rhetorical. I have published many investigations on this topic, and the latest one is shocking. The level of corruption in Ukraine has reached such a level that it is no longer corruption, but banditry. In Ukrainian legislation, corruption is defined as the abuse of power or official position to obtain illegal benefits. Let's stop there. Yaroslav Zeleznyk talks about the scale of MDF production and large-scale fraud. This is just one example. There are organizations such as Case.ua, where respected economist Andrei Boyarchuk and the Institute of Socioeconomic Transformations write that budget losses from the actions of tax authorities range from 240 to 400 billion hryvnia per year. When Ukraine had a GDP of 2 trillion hryvnia in 2014, this was a significant percentage. Vlad, I know you write about the tax service and the people who work there. Why is your information valuable? If I write about hetmanism as a person who somehow shot, then everything seems to be fine. But you know everything to me, that he is the curator, and your information is valuable. You write what is happening in the region, how the commission for blocking and unblocking works. This is very valuable information. Let's try to put together the overall picture of what is happening throughout the country. What amount, like 400 billion hryvnia, can somehow disappear unnoticed from the budget? Why is it invisible? Very noticeable, very understandable, very transparent. Everything is visible, everything is controlled, but no one is interested in looking there. This is a very easy and at the same time difficult question. Why isn't anyone reacting? The question is rhetorical. I have already published dozens of investigations on this topic, and the last one is shocking, because the level of corruption in Ukraine has reached such a level that it is no longer corruption, but banditry. In Ukrainian legislation, corruption is defined as the abuse of power or official position to obtain illegal benefits. Gangsterism is when a group of people, such as law enforcement, band together to carry out criminal plans. Simply put, corruption is when I, an official, use my official position for personal gain. For example, I use a company car for my needs or charge $500 to expedite the processing of a passport, which usually takes 3 days, but for money I can do it in 2 hours. This is called corruption. Banditry is when a group of people use weapons to attack a person or organization for the purpose of robbery. If several officials united by common interests are doing the same thing, then this is already an organized criminal group. For example, a group of people in Ukraine with certain powers and access to the budget can rob the budget. If they provide services and at the same time rob, this can be called corruption. However, if they are armed and rob with force, this is banditry. In the tax service, people may not be armed, but they have the authority to access taxes that should go to the budget. They can stop the flow of taxes and organize the flushing of funds from the budget, which is actually a robbery of the budget. In addition, they can rob not only the budget, but also other enterprises and organizations. This means they act like a gang. Economic experts calculate budget losses, and this is not difficult to do, since the country's consumption, exports and imports are known. If instead of the expected 20%, only 8% goes to the budget, it is obvious that someone has appropriated the missing funds. You said that everyone sees and knows, but no one does anything. This is banditry, because if everyone sees and knows, and no one reacts, then there is a conspiracy. Marian Zablotsky, a deputy, said that when they investigated grain exports and VAT refunds, it turned out that more than 200 firms were ineffective. The deputy drew attention to this. Who should have reacted? The Attorney General's office and other law enforcement agencies should have launched an investigation immediately upon receiving such information. The Ministry of Justice describes the schemes, but no one reacts. If the Ministry of Justice writes that someone is robbing the budget, the Prosecutor General's office must respond immediately. If no one reacts, it indicates collusion and a consolidated decision not to take action. The Ministry of Justice is the Ministry of Justice. If it writes that someone is robbing the budget, the Prosecutor General's office must respond immediately. Prosecutors said that their supervision was taken away, but the DBI should have intervened. It all depends on the amount and the figures involved. Regarding efficiency, in each region the tax service has commissions that monitor fictitious enterprises. These commissions see all the fictitious enterprises. They have them in the palm of their hands. So we see that economic experts are calculating, but I think that it is not very difficult, because we know consumption throughout the country. We know approximately how much it should be, we know exports and imports, and some approximate figures should be included in the budget. When we see that instead of 20% we have only 8%, it is obvious that someone took this surplus. You said something that everyone sees and knows, but no one does anything. That's why I say these are bandits. Because if everyone sees and knows and no one reacts, then there is a conspiracy. Marian Zablotsky, a lawmaker, said that when they investigated grain exports and VAT refunds, more than 200 firms were found to be ineffective. The deputy drew attention to this. Who should have reacted? The Attorney General's office and other law enforcement agencies should have launched an investigation immediately upon receiving such information. The Ministry of Justice describes the schemes, but no one reacts. If the Ministry of Justice writes that someone is robbing the budget, the Prosecutor General's office must respond immediately. If no one reacts, it indicates collusion and a consolidated decision not to take action. Regarding efficiency, in each region the tax service has commissions that monitor fictitious enterprises. These commissions see all the fictitious enterprises. They have them in the palm of their hands. I can give 2 examples regarding taxation. In each region, the tax service has commissions that monitor fictitious enterprises. These commissions see all the fictitious enterprises. They have them in the palm of their hands. For our viewers, I want to say that statistics were recently published that said that some people here have 800 businesses. The record holder was a man with an Armenian surname, who had 1,300 enterprises per person. The tax office, of course, knows about this. These commissions that I'm talking about are monitoring exactly what you just said. They see it all. You are talking about 200 billion. I fixed 400 billion. Anyone interested can look at the research. It talks about this in great detail. In 9 regions, these commissions are pure gangster structures that do not have any powers, because the heads of these commissions are actually dummy. Everything is done in such a way as to control the process and so that no one interferes with theft. These commissions are now called blocking and unblocking commissions. They deal with issues of blocking and unblocking VAT, monitoring the risks of the enterprises you are talking about. They see it all in real time. Not a single scheme can pass them by. Everything is monitored. As for the damage to the state, in the Kharkiv region 5 billion hryvnia, in the Sumy region 3 billion, in the Nikolaev region, several billion. Here you have almost 10 billion in 3 regions over the last year. These commission decisions are illegal. They made decisions on such amounts illegally, which is detrimental to the state budget. The commissions are illegal because they appoint people who do not have the right to be appointed. The resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers states who can hold this position, but in practice, these positions are filled by random people. For example, the commission should be headed by the head or deputy head of the service, and is headed by an ordinary inspector. In the the Zhytomyr region, where the loss was more than 2 billion hryvnia over the last year, the commission was headed not even by a regional tax officer, but simply by a person from the city. These people were not appointed by chance. They are associated with certain influential persons, but they illegally head the commissions. And here I am, using the example of 3 regions, showing you 10 billion losses. Another example is the DIA portal. All payments that go through DIA, including donations, fines, go through a company associated with the Russian online casino. This payment system is a national payment service, but at the same time it is related to Russian business. This payment system is located on Artyoma Street. It is registered in an apartment where another 400 businesses are registered. I was there. It's a closed room. There's nothing inside, not a single employee. According to all tax criteria, it absolutely falls under the risk category. No personnel, no funds, no real estate or movable property. Billions of hryvnias pass through it a year, because DIA handles several billions a year through itself. When I wrote about this 6 months ago, there were about 4 billion. Now it can be up to 10 billion a year. That is, 10 billion is pumped through DIA, through a fictitious enterprise that has crazy activity. This is truly shocking information.
Имеет отношение к русским, зарегистрировано в квартире, в которой зарегистрировано еще 400 предприятий. Понимаешь, ты говоришь про фиктивность, что на одном человеке там 800 предприятий. Вот DIA, платежная система DIA зарегистрирована в квартире, где еще 400 предприятий. Я был там.
И тоже
там нету ни одного сотрудника. Это закрытая комната. Там внутри ничего нету. Я был там, понимаешь? По всем, значит, критериям налоговой, я опубликовал эти цифры в прошлом году, по всем критериям налоговой, она абсолютно подпадает под рисковость. У них нету там, вот
персонала нет.
Персонала нету, там нету этих самых средств, этих самых недвижимое имущество, вот это вот самое, да? То есть она подпадает под все критерии риска. Понимаешь? Под все критерии риска. Мало того, так и через нее проходят в год миллиарды гривен, потому что DIA через себя проворачивает несколько миллиардов гривен в год. На тот момент в полгода было почти, когда я писал, это было там, около 4 миллиардов, мне кажется. Да? То есть там в год до 10 миллиардов может там прокачиваться. Вот 10 миллиардов через DIA прокачивается через фиктивное предприятие, который имеет все фиктивности.
Сумасшедшая информация. Давай.
Find out, but I've been writing about this for over a year. Are you just asking where? Here it is. Why doesn't anyone react to it? Look, I posted. I mostly write to law enforcement. You know well, my interlocutors from the special services gave me a certificate about the head of the Sumy tax office, Sneshko. A person has a bunch of new cars, land, and a number of companies reimburse that. Here is a certificate on A4 sheet, which is placed on the table of the heads of law enforcement agencies. It talks about illegal enrichment, as many as 3 to 4 articles of the criminal code, which law enforcement agencies see. The head of the tax office of the Sumy region is Artyom Sneshko, if I'm not mistaken. This operational information is on the desk of law enforcement agencies, and they do nothing. That is, let me clarify. The lowest level is the investigator who dug it all up, found it in operational work. Right, he found everything and brings it to his boss. He says, "Let's lock this guy up and put him in prison." Or will we initiate a case there and go to court? And the boss says, "Wait, I'll call you now." Something like this. Of course, not just like that, but it is placed on the boss's desk. He says, "Okay, thank you. Go on and work." And nothing happens. That's it specifically, you know. I'll show you now, it's amazing. Let's go to my Telegram channel. Here is this certificate on A4. It says, Sneshko Artyom. There is information. Sneshko owns 5 real estate properties. An apartment in the Dnieper. There is a Honda CR-V with such and such a number. The tax service has opened a Lexus RX 350, which is in the fund, worth 3 million hryvnia, and so on. According to information from the declaration, the family also acquired land. Taking into account the above, there are signs of a crime under Articles 368, 364, 366-2, 368-5 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine. Here is an analytical report for you. Everything is written. It turns out that there is a tax service. It is headed in each region by persons who fall under the articles. Maybe not all, I don't know, but if they don't react to anyone, it turns out that tax officials are very tempted to enrich themselves. And even more so if you are the head of the commission through which enterprises are blocked, and you decide by your decision to unblock them. Look how this certificate begins. Facts of the acquisition of unjustified assets by the head of the main directorate of the State Tax Service in the Sumy region. Here you are. That is, look, this certificate. They should come to him right away with handcuffs, put them on in the office, and take him out. But this doesn't happen. Why? I explain. Because this is banditry. It is obvious that the head of the tax region is protected, either by some kind of prosecutor, or by the SBI, or by NABU, or by the SBU, because if he had not been protected, he would have been arrested. Here you go, please. Why don't they arrest him? Probably because they are interested in something. A person has a lot of assets, which means they are doing something. Here you go. A law enforcement agency, a prosecutor and the head of the tax office are robbing the Sumy region. Here are 3 people. This is already a criminal group who have weapons, powers and rob the Ukrainian budget and Ukrainian residents. This is banditry, not corruption. They formed a gang. I wanted you to see a specific example in some area. These illegal appointments of some left-wing people. How does this happen? Someone takes responsibility for appointing such a person. A lot was said in the Khmelnytsky region. I talked about this. These events will develop there. Well, there is Getmontsev. He gives the task to Kirienko. Who are Andrenko and Kirienko? As far as I understand, the tax office is now headed. It has a deputy, Sakur. Here he is, according to his job descriptions.
Вот он по своим должностным инструкциям
Secure overseas excise taxes. For example, excise tax on alcohol. And by the way, he also oversees the commissions. He has assistants such as Gretchenaya. They worked for Getmontsev when he became a people's deputy. At first they were assistants to the deputy, and then they became heads of the tax office. It's not for nothing that I call them sixes or pounds. Then they take their subordinates and appoint them as leaders in the area. Let's look at a specific example. Let's say you were my assistant. I became an influential people's deputy. Or, let's say, you headed the tax office. Then I tell you, Pasha, appoint a person under our control to the region. You take your subordinate, and we assign him to the Khmelnytsky region. This is how it happens and is being built throughout the country. I remember an investigation where it was said that in most regions these commissions are headed by people who worked in the tax police. This is especially true for Kharkiv and everything related to excisable goods. This is pure banditry. You just need to understand that these are bandits, not government. There is no management, no team to implement improvements. These are people who came to rob, using their official position for personal gain, to rob the budget and the country on a scale of 400 to 500 billion. Hryvnia. Before the war it was about $10 billion. Now perhaps more. Excise taxes are controlled by the so-called Monaco Group. They are also called Makarovtsi, or garbage. Why? Because these are former employees of the Department of Economic Protection of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The tax office has a department for combating organized crime. All the names are known. I have commented on them more than once. According to this quota, representatives of that gang, including Sakur, Getmontsev's assistant, issue licenses for fuel trading, take away licenses, and take over huge networks of gas stations. They constantly demand cash. Everyone knows about this. There are operational reports. I personally saw them, but no one does anything. For example, in Kyiv 2 weeks ago the deputy head of the city tax office was arrested for a bribe of $3,000. It's just a laugh. Perhaps there was some kind of setup, or the person actually took a bribe and was caught handing over the money. Now this man, Nefedov, is sitting. Getmontsev personally brought him there and installed him, personally defended and arranged for him. This Nefedov was a subordinate of Getmontsev's assistant, Gretchenaya. It turns out that there are some authorities that are not involved in the gang, which still detain someone, even with such small amounts. Perhaps this is part of a larger game to show an imitation of the fight against corruption. I think it's competition. Secondly, it happens that someone crosses some kind of red line. When they take a bribe of $3,000 from the deputy head of the Kyiv tax office, you need to understand that the tax office has always been associated with extortion, but before it was not so obvious and dirty. Before Getmontsev's arrival, the deputy head of the Kyiv tax office was always a dollar millionaire. After all, in terms of the amount of money, the Kyiv tax office is comparable to half of Ukraine, since many large companies are registered in the capital. Previously, $3,000 for such people was a change they had to eat for breakfast. You couldn't just approach the deputy head of the tax office. It was a completely different status. And when, in such a position, some incomprehensible young guy, who was installed as a figurehead, goes to a meeting and takes $3,000, you know this even by concept, he's an oligophrenic. It's just, well, you know, that's why these red lines intersect. You have to be mentally disabled to do something like that. Of course, they can be punished for this, although I am not inclined to believe it. This is the fight against corruption and banditry in the tax service. Why? Because the problem is not Nefedov, who is now imprisoned here, who made $3,000. He is a nobody. He was given the task of collecting money from the central office, and he collects. You see, he simply doesn't have the brains to collect more. The central apparatus is tasked with collecting more, and then we will all be told that this is patriotic corruption, that all this money was collected to buy sniper rifles or something ridiculous like that. No, just $10 billion of money is being withdrawn centrally. Of course, all banks and the Ministry of Finance know about this. Such amounts cannot be withdrawn unnoticed. Look, I'll tell you more. Firstly, you say the National Bank, the Ministry of Finance. Last year, I wrote a post on my Telegram channel, specifically cutting out a piece from Minister Marchenko's interview. He officially said that he has no influence on customs, that it is controlled by security forces. Marchenko said in an interview that he does not know where the money allocated by the Ministry of Defense goes. He doesn't understand why he singles them out and there aren't enough of them, or why they ask for more. He said that people were chipping in for some pickups, and he didn't know where the money was going. He told Forbes.ua. Previously, he said that customs is controlled by security forces, and the tax service is also under their control. These are the words of the Minister of Finance, who honestly admitted that this is banditry. He admitted his inability to restore order or eliminated this inaction. He told the truth. But if you know this, why don't you resign? This is a personal question. He holds meetings, says that he has no authority, but his key employees are on the ground, subordinate to assistants. He says that no decision is made and no document is signed without his permission, but he claims that he does not influence decisions, although Marchenko claims that he coordinates all appointments. There is a political agreement, and this is the order of things. In principle, if Marchenko and Schmeigel wanted to stop this, they could. For example, they ignored Resolution 1165 on blocking tax invoices, which the Supreme Court declared illegal back in 2020. Now Marchenko and Schmeigel could simply cancel this resolution, and all the schemes would collapse. A day later they would be fired and others would be appointed who would return everything as it should be. There are towers that control all this. Key positions are occupied by weak-willed people who are unable to stop these schemes. If I understand correctly, they don't want to do this. The towers can be called appanage principalities. Each has its own territory, which may include government agencies, and they cut their hair and collect tribute. You see, in each territory, let's say, the appanage principality runs its own government bodies, collects tribute and does not interfere with other people's territory. Nefyodov, whom you mentioned, is actually just a tool. He was given a task, and he completes it, because that's the system. The central apparatus sets a task, and everyone in their place must carry it out. The problem is that the system is inherently corrupt and works for self-enrichment. Even if at the top they talk about the fight against corruption, on the ground everything remains the same. For example, Marchenko, he frankly admitted that he does not control the processes in the Ministry of Defense and the tax service. Money is allocated, but no one knows where it goes. This is an admission of his helplessness in restoring order. He sees problems, but can't do anything because the whole system is riddled with corruption. Marchenko holds meetings, but decisions are made without his participation. He claims that he has no influence on the process, but his signature is on all documents. This is a political arrangement in which key figures simply occupy their positions, but do not solve problems. If they really wanted to change something, they could start by repealing illegal regulations like 1165 to freeze tax invoices. The Supreme Court declared it illegal, but this decision was ignored. Now, if Marchenko and Shmygel really wanted, they could cancel it, and the schemes would collapse. But this is followed by dismissals and new appointments, which will return everything to normal. The system works in such a way that key positions are occupied by people who do not want or cannot change the existing order of things. These are like appanage principalities, where everyone is responsible for their own territory and collects tribute. State bodies are controlled by the security forces, and they all work for enrichment, and not for the benefit of the people. Here's an example of how the system works. Everyone has their own interests, their own territories, and they do not overlap. All this leads to the fact that corruption becomes the norm, and there is no one to fight it. Another appanage principality, that's all. And so they divided it up like this, and everyone takes what they can. That's why there is neither Marchenko nor Shmygel there. They just can't do it. You know, if we had a real prime minister who would think about how to organize the economy, how to start buying weapons, how to increase the budget, then he would probably stop all this in one day. But he does not have such powers. Such a person, firstly, will never become prime minister. Secondly, if he did this, he would simply be fired the next day. We are in a deadlock. Someone is withdrawing up to $10 billion from the budget. There are specific people who did this. For example, in my investigations I showed these people. Money is withdrawn specifically. Surely, all this does not go into one pocket. This is distributed among customs officers and tax officials. But there is still some centralized place where this cash flows. It is no coincidence that the man who was carrying $700,000 was heading to the center. There are a lot of such streams, and they flow into one place. Of course, the president knows about this. For me, this is the biggest mystery. If I had the opportunity to ask him this question, I would ask it. But I have not been invited to public events for a long time. Surely, he would say that he was hearing about this for the first time. I asked questions to various presidents at press conferences. I published 3 or 4 investigations about how in 9 regions of the country the budget is simply robbed through the tax office. Yes, by the way, all frontline regions are included in this number. All this, among other things, happens there. Why? Because they see fictitious enterprises and withdraw money. Therefore, these problems must be addressed correctly. They see taxes, Of course they do. They all participate in tenders. My security service also showed that these fictitious heads of tax commissions are located in all the frontline zones where construction looting is taking place. If you publish such an investigation, it turns out that within the security forces there are decent people who did their work in good faith, but they can't let it go further in their career because the boss has to sign it. He cannot go to court or anything else himself. It turns out that the heads of law enforcement agencies are blocking what can and most certainly be investigated. A huge amount of material has been collected. It's always been like this. The middle level of law enforcement agencies consists of many decent people. Without a change of government, without a change of the prosecutor general, the head of the FBI, nothing will change. There must be people who want to catch these criminals and not participate in banditry. Now they are all tied up in this banditry. Obviously, this is true for me, because if it weren't for this, the deputy head of the tax authorities of Ukraine would have been under investigation a long time ago. Buckwheat, you're talking about grain. All this is connected with the Greek company, because its department for checking legal entities is engaged in grain exports. The foreign exchange earnings for the grain that they so wanted to export amounted to $10 billion. Our officials are still getting out of this scheme. Economists and prime ministers are fighting with Poles over this. This is a very important question. Gretchenaya and her assistants are responsible for grain inspections and exports. They've been doing this for a long time. We are in a situation where there are specific people who are siphoning billions of dollars from the budget. And all this happens with the participation of senior officials. They control the flow of money and distribute it among themselves. As a result, we do not have the resources to develop the economy and army. We need a leader who can change this system. But such people do not become prime ministers. Even if they could, they are quickly eliminated. We're at a dead end. Everyone knows who is withdrawing money, but no one can do anything. This is a systemic problem, and it cannot be solved without a change of government. I hope that one day we will have a leader who can restore order. But this requires a lot of effort and support. We must fight for justice and transparency in our country. Non-return of foreign currency earnings? Yes, here you go. This is a serious and relevant question in our difficult times. I say again, dear Hetman's assistant, it's good that we touched on this topic. Thank you for coming and raising this important issue. Well, to be honest, we don't have a specific solution to this complex problem yet because it's just so global and multifaceted. Yes, we can only state a fact and discuss its consequences. We can only hope that our competent authorities, perhaps some of them are experienced law enforcement officers, should do something about this. Damn it, the situation requires immediate attention and decisive action. You heard that my Telegram channel is read by almost all law enforcement agencies in the country, from ordinary employees to managers. But this is also no secret. Everyone knows about it. Friends, information travels quickly and we try to keep you up to date. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to stay up to date with the latest news and analytics. And I will definitely invite Vlad again in the near future. Together we will watch and analyze how these events will develop in dynamics. Thank you all for your attention. Bye, dear viewers and listeners. Friends, you were on Pavel Sebastianovich's channel. where we discuss the most pressing and relevant topics. And it's a pleasure to hear his comments and analysis, isn't it? Stay tuned for more.